Parsha starts off Yishma Yisrael. That Yisrael heard Kaimidjan. Chaysim Moshe, Eish Kol Asher Asel, Kim and Moshe, the Salama. You heard everything that Hashem did for Klal Yisrael. Moshe Ben and Natal Yisrael. Ki Heitzi Hashem is Tzom Yitzrayim. So Rashi, famous Rashi. Rashi's Ma Shmuel Shama Uba. What did he hear? Kriyas Yamsuf U'Mechemes Amalek. So we spoke I don't want to start off sort of a hemshech, but we spoke a little bit other weeks. A few weeks, I think, Parsha Shmuz, we spoke about what was the shidduch between Moshe Rabbeinu and Yisrael, such a strange shidduch that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought about, that they should, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Rebbe of Klal Yisrael should be Mishadach with a Kohen Midjan. It was a very strange shidduch. So we said that there's a tzad hashava in the Inyan of Mesiras Nefesh. That as we hear in this week's parsha, Rashi mentions that Yisrael was sitting b'chvoid shel olam. He had the biggest covet, the biggest position in the world, so to say, in that world, the world of Tumah, where it was of Galachim, and he gave it up to come to a midbar. And we find Moshe Rabbeinu also was sitting in Kvod shel olam. He was sitting in Beis Pari, he was sitting in the king's palace, and he risked his own life to save a yid from being hit by a Mitzri, and he had to run away for so many years. So there's a tzad hashava in this inyan of Mesiras Nefesh, that they gave away all the comforts in the world to do what they felt is right. That Hashem brought them together. We spoke about also, I think last week, about the Moshe Rabbeinu by the sneh, that Moshe Rabbeinu, that Hashem said, "Vayar Hashem kisar lirois," that Moshe Rabbeinu went to see the sneh. So I've said over from someone that everybody would go see. It's such an interesting, fascinating thing that we'll go see. But the Supporter there says that it's in his blindness. Moshe Rabbeinu thought into things. He didn't just see, he doesn't just look to see something interesting, but he thought into things. And you see that here now with Yisrael. Also, I mentioned, if you remember the Maisa with Chatzkel Levenstein, that he worked. He went out originally as a bach. He went to work a little bit, and he made some money. And I think in the mikveh once, he left. His money was taken, and he right away he said, "I see the money doesn't have a shade. It's not worth anything. It'd be taken away so easily." So then he went back to yeshiva, and he became what he became. But if he learned the less he thought into things, something happened. He said whatever. Each person has his own decisions to make, but he from what that Maisa, he brought into it. Afterwards, I reminded myself there's even a bigger Maisa we're familiar with Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva, the Gemara says it was an Amoritz, and he saw the water dripping on the stone. Other people could have seen this also, and it made a hole through the stone, and that changed his life. That what he saw changed his life. He said, the water can penetrate a stone, so the Torah can penetrate my heart. And then he undertook to learn, and he became a altogether different person, Rekiva. So we see this by Yisrael also, by Yishma Yisrael, that he heard something, and that changed his whole life, Yisrael. I saw it starting from B'Gel Apian. He speaks about this first Rashi. So he says, Chazal asks, Mashmu Shama Oba. What does that question mean? If someone did something, so he must have heard something. That's what he explains. He must have heard something that no one else heard. You would think so. That someone got a tip or something, someone got an idea, someone got an idea, and he's the one that came because he knows about something. It's like someone gets a hot tip, there's an opportunity. You could go, if you go somewhere, you could buy something cheap now, and it's something for sale. Yeah, so you go, you want to be, you got the idea, so you go, you run. So Mashmur, what did he hear that he came running to the midbar? He must have got some hot tip. But Eli Apyan says that we say in the Shir every day, Sham La'amim Yugazan, that all the nations in the world heard about Kriyas Yamsuf. Sham La'amim Yugazan, the Korachad Vesha Palashes. The whole world trembled when they heard about Kriyas Yamsuf. Shamu, they also heard the same word. Shamu Am and Yugazan, they even trembled when they heard. But that's it. That was it. That's when it began. It was over. He said, but Mashmu Shamu Ba, that's what did he hear that he, so he says that's what he says, that he had them, because Yisro had this same milah of Bakashas HaEmes. Yisro was a person looking for the truth. And he says, even when he was a Galach, he tried every Avodah Zarah in the world. And each one he rejected. He tried each one. That means he was still looking. He was looking. And he was looking to find the emes. He tried every single Avodah Zarah. And then he finally came to the emes. When he heard the emes, that brought him to change his life. So he says, what happened to all the other nations? The way he describes it here. He says that the other nations, bikshu klaus emes. They were looking for emes. So they heard, they trembled. They just were busy with their own taivas. So how are they going to find the emes, he says. So even though Shamam Yugazan, it made no roshim on them at all. They were like someone who's deaf. He says, even though they heard, they're like deaf, and they're in their taivas, and it doesn't make any roshim on them. So this is the godless of Yisrael, also similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, that to think into things and to make a move, to make a decision, to do something. I saw from Rebel Yeshivas, he also starts the parsha on this Inyan, but he starts it in another way. The way this is the beginning of the Shmuz that he gave. He says, "B'noyeg shabaylam." He starts off that the meaning of olam is, if you hear about someone that was matzliach in business, someone became an ish matzliach. So everyone's curious to find out what's his secret. How did he become so matzliach? But Rebbe Yeshivas says that this is what we do in Gashmias. We should do the same thing in Ruchnias. If you see someone who was matzliach in Ruchnias, we should also be curious. What was his? How is he so matzliach? What was his success? So he says, we see in this week's parsha that Yisrael was matzliach in Ruchnias. We have a parsha Yisrael. We learn came a chelik of the Torah, and he gave eitzah to Moshe Rabbeinu in this parsha about making dayanim. So he was meridik matzliach. He says, what's the secret of Yisrael's success? We should be curious to think how did he do it? How did he accomplish so much? So he says Rebel Yisrael says, Nira, in my opinion, he says, the mile of Yisrael was this, that he had the koyach hashmiya, the Yishma Yisrael. That he listened, he said. But it's not stam shmiya, but a shmiya that brings to ma'aseh. He listened and he heard and he absorbed and he thought about things. That's the koyach of the shmiya, he says. And he says also, he makes another point, which also, the godless of Yisrael, when he gave the eitzah to Moshe Rabbeinu, he brings here that to Biruchim, the Mashgiach, the Mir Mashgiach, he writes that he's spoiled from Yisrael. He said he can't get over Yisrael. He said because Yisrael comes to the Midbar, comes to Klal Yisrael, and he sees Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the Rabbin Shel Yisrael, he's sitting from day to night, the people coming to him, and he starts saying that you're not doing good, and if someone's a stranger comes into a place and a fremder comes in and he starts giving eitzes, he says, but that was Yisrael. Yisrael, that was his nature. He was looking for the emes and he didn't stop, even to speak up and to correct Moshe Rabbeinu. He said he brings out the godless of Yisrael.
He's the father.
What?
He's the father.
Yeah, Father. Okay, that's the godless. So then he has one of Rebel Yishivas goes right in the parsha. He says that what did he hear? So it says he heard Kriyas Yamsum Chemes Amali. So he says there's the Ramban, everybody knows better. The Ramban, there's a machlekes in Chazal. When did Yisro come? Before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah? So Ramban is a kashis that if he came after Matan Torah, how come there's no mention of that? It should say B'Yishma Yisrael. He says, what did he hear? He heard the first pasuk in the parsha. Es kol asher asol kim l'Moshe Yisrael hamek yotzias Hashem Yisrael miMitzrayim. He heard that, and Rashi even says, what did he hear? He heard Kriyas Yamsuf, Chamas Amalek. It should be some kind of mention. He heard about Mount Torah. And even later the pasuk says, V'yisapeh Moshe l'chosnei, Moshe told his shver, his father-in-law, Es kol asher asa Hashem l'parel l'Mitzrayim l'Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem saved them by Tzilim Hashem. Why doesn't he tell them about Mount Torah? That's Ramban's kashas. He gives a teretz, Ramban.
No, he says that's why like that shot that it came before.
Yeah. So Rebellion wants to give a teretz. Why was it so important, this Kriyas Yamsuf, that he heard Kriyas Yamsuf and not about Mount Torah? So he gives his own teretz. He says like this. You remember something?
I think he said it last year, but
I remember if I said it.
I don't remember.
I don't remember from last. Okay. So he says that Yisro, we know, as I'll tell us, was one of the advisors of Pari, and they were discussing how to take care of Klal Yisrael, to get rid of Klal Yisrael. And the one person said, "Let's do this to them. Let's do this." So, but Hashem is going to punish if we do this. So they came up with the eitzah that they should drown them in water, because that Hashem won't be able to punish them, because Hashem made a promise not to bring a mabul. That was the eitzah. Yisro ran away. We know Chazal said already, didn't want any part of it. But Rebbe Yishvei wants to say that Yisro for years was troubled by this. They got away with such a plan. They sort of outsmarted, they came up with a plan that Hashem can't punish them. And this bothered him for years, he wants to say, Rebbe Yishvei. So he says when it came Kriyas Yamsuf, and Hashem paid him back, Kibadover Ashezadu Aleim, that's what Pasuk says, that he heard that the thing that they did wrong, they were punished with that very same thing. Hashem made a promise. Hashem made a promise not to bring a mabul. So he understood the teretz that the mabul, Hashem promised not to bring a mabul on the whole world, like he did at that time. But on one nation, he could bring the mabul. So this answered his kasha. This is, and he says when a person has a kasha that bothers him, and he gets a teretz, that makes a much deeper impression on the person than just the other things that happen, other miracles that happen. So he says that's why this particular thing is what the Torah is stressing, that he heard about Kriyas Yamsuf. He has him trying Kriyas Yamsuf because that is what made the Roshim on Yisro to make him come back. So Rebbe Yisvei goes with this, and he actually talks about this, and he encourages people to have kashas. He says it's good to have a kasha, and it should bother you, and then it doesn't mean you have a teretz right away. But one day you get a teretz, and that will make a Roshman. He says he also applied to learning. He says if in learning, when we have a kasha, the kasha should bother us. We should think about it. We have a kasha on the Gemara. We have a kasha on Taisus. We don't understand, and it should really try to let it bother us. And then when we work it out and have a teretz, we'll remember the Taisus better. We'll remember the Gemara better because it bothered us. The kasha, that's what he's encouraging it to apply to learning as well. We don't see it much nowadays, but maybe a little bit in the Beis Medrash. We hear sometimes screaming. Somebody gets excited, But I know the Mashgiach in Lakewood used to sometimes it's bothering him. We don't hear any Menachem in the Beis Medrash. It should be a Menachem. Menachem is a Torah. That's how it's supposed to be. So, but nowadays we're pretty easy going about it. He said, okay. It says later in this week's parsha, Hashem says, you saw what I did to Mitzrayim. I carried you like on the wings of an eagle. Love Yeskem Eloi. And then Hashem says further, now, if you listen to my voice, now that I took you out of Mitzrayim and I carried you, and if you listen to me, and you keep my bris, you'll be special to me from all the nations. So first he brings the Rashi on this about Kanfi Neshorim. He says that Asher Sisa Mitzrayim. He said the Mitzrayim deserved to be punished. They'd had many, many Averis, he said. But I only punished them because of what they did to you. And then he says, like an eagle that carries its children on top of its wings, because the mother eagle says that it's better that if someone shoots an arrow, it should go into me and not in my children. So he says, Hashem said, I did like that. I was between you and the Mitzrayim, and they threw their arrows, and it went into the Onan, that Hashem was makabel all the arrows that were shot at Klal Yisrael, to show that his love for Klal Yisrael. And then he says, Va'ata, now keep my bris. So Rashi says, now if you're makabel, the Torah and the mitzvahs, Yerav Luchem Mikan Ve'elech, you'll see that it's going to be sweet to you. Shekol Cholas Koshes, the beginning, mitzvahs Torah is not always sweet in the beginning, but if you'll be makabel it, Yerav Luchem. Cholas Koshes, but then you'll have a sweetness in the Torah. So I have here from Shmuel Birnbaum, he says about this Rashi. So he says that the Torah, it says until him is Mesukim Midvash V'Neifes Tzufim. The Torah is sweet. Mesukim Midvash, sweeter than honey, V'Neifes Tzufim. So he says, okay, there's such a thing as Cholas Koshes. At the beginning sometimes it can be difficult, but B'Etzem, the Torah is very sweet. So he has a kasha, where every day we say Birchas HaTorah, we daven to have the sweetness of the Torah. The Harav no, we beg for this. Hashem, please, Harav no Hashem Lakeinu, it's Divrei Yisrael Befino. We should be zeichet to have to feel the sweetness of the Torah. So he says that anyone that knew Rav Shmuel Birnbaum can understand who his kasha is. He was Kulei Torah, and so it bothered him, this bracha. What are we davening? Hashem should make the Torah sweet. He says the Torah is so sweet. It says Mesukim Midvash, V'Neifes Tzufim. So what are we davening for? Would you daven that the honey should be sweet? Please make the honey sweet to me. The Torah is sweet like honey. It says. What are we davening for? So he says, he says in the world it's just the opposite. He speaks about drugs over here a little bit. He says that the people have a false sweetness in things that shouldn't be sweet. He says in B'shasha oiskim anoshim b'dvar machem. Sometimes people get involved with other things. Tayim imheim rak arivis metum. It's an imaginary sweetness, but they're not really sweet. He says, why do we have to fight against drugs? Must be because people think, or somehow, that they're tempted to take drugs, but they get some kind of whatever it is, lift from it, or whatever it is. So he says, but even though be'etzim it's bitter, and he says it's novel, and he says all it does is it kills people. It kills these people. And still, people have a temptation for this sweetness, for this feeling that they get from the drugs, he says. It's a false sweetness. And he says the Torah, which is really sweet, Mesukim Midvash, he says, we should have a sweetness for that. We should feel the sweetness. Why is it that we have to daven to feel the sweetness of what's really the emesis, the emes of Mesikas is Torah? He says, okay, Rashi told us cholas koshes. At the beginning, maybe it's difficult. So he throws in a little word. He says that we're always at the beginning, because it says, look what daf we're up to, he says. You see, we're always in the beginning. So that's why maybe we don't hit the Mesikas, because we're still at the beginning of the Masechta all the time. But I think that's a little, like he throws in a line. But he says, Itaka says, when you chazir it more many times, then you do get a Mesikas, you get into it more. So he says, I'll answer this kasha with a story. Don't expect a real big story, but a small story that he said, I'm going to answer this kasha with it. He said there was in the time of the Chavetz Chaim, Buchanan, he said it was an episode that somebody was traveling on a rakevis. I don't know if it means a wagon or it means on a train those days. I'm not sure what he's referring to, but it doesn't matter. But he says there was someone on the train, and the Yid got up to put on the tefillin on the train or the wagon. And some guy started screaming at him or trying to stop him from putting on his tefillin. That's the story there. That's the myth. But Rebbe Chanan heard the story. Rebbe Chanan heard that the Yid put on tefillin and a guy was screaming at him. So Rabbi Chanan said, if it would be my Rebbe, Chavetz Chaim, the guy wouldn't have screamed at him. Why? He says, because it says, Ro kolam yoretz, kishem Hashem nikra lecha, v'yoro mimeka. That says when you wear tefillin, that the goyim should be afraid of you. The thing is, the mice with the goyim put on tefillin, they got shtirenu. So it's going tefillin shabarosh. So he said, if my Rebbe Chavetz Chaim would have been put on tefillin, no guy would have started screaming at him. He said, it must be, he says, that this person that put on the tefillin, he says, he must be, he wasn't wearing the tefillin either kedin, he says, or maybe the tefillin weren't kosher or something. He said, if he would have put on the tefillin correctly and it would have been kosher pair of tefillin, it couldn't happen that the guy would scream at him. That's what Rabbi Chanan felt. Mm-hmm. That's the Maisa. So Shmuel Birnbaum, he said that the same is with Torah. He said if we Mesikas HaTorah, just like the tefillin should bring a yira, a natural yira. Tefillin brings a yira to the goyim. So he says when you're wearing the tefillin correctly, he says the same thing is with Torah. If we would learn Torah properly, we would have the Mesikas HaTorah. That's what he says. If we don't feel we daven v'haravna, because we have to learn Torah properly, he said. If then we would feel the Mesikas of Torah. That's what he says. So he says, it has to be a mitzvah of Torah. And if we apply ourselves and we try to learn the Torah properly and focus on it and harv in the Torah, we'll feel the Mesikas of Torah, because that's the way to learn the Torah. But then he says, interesting, to me it was interesting, he says, there's another way to approach this, he says, to feel the Mesikas in the Torah. Besides, even if we're not learning Torah properly. And he says that this is the connection that Hashem is saying here with the I carried you on the wings of an eagle. And then he comes and he says after that, the union of Atim Shemay Tishma Karli, and like Rashi says, if you Kabbalah Torah, Yerav Lachem, it'll become sweet to you. What's the connection here between these psukim, that I carried you like an eagle, and the Torah will become sweet to you? So he says that Hashem is trying to show us how much He loves us. He says that a parent, if he has no other way, would maybe put himself in front of the arrows to save a child. Also, if he had no other way, but if he has another way of saving, he wouldn't pick this. Because Kodesh Baruch Hu has many ways to save, but Hashem wanted to show that He put Himself there to receive the arrows, to show how much He was trying to bring out how much He loves Klal Yisrael. So he says, Shmuel Birnbaum says that, let's say someone has his father wrote a sefer, and if he feels the love of his father, and his father left over a sefer, so he says the son would learn the sefer with a cheshik. This is the sefer that his father wrote. The father that he loves wrote this sefer, and the father who loved him, he felt the love for his father. He wants to read, he wants to learn the sefer that his father, even if he doesn't have an interest in this inyan, let's say, but the fact that it came from the father that loves him so much, he would want to learn the sefer. And he says, if he could bring nachas to his father by learning the sefer, if there's a certain relationship that he feels the love and he wants to give back some of that love and appreciation. So he speaks out over here. He says how much hana a mother has trying to get a little child to eat. The child listens to the mother and eats. The mother has a nachas. He starts with that, he says. And he says how much nachas parents have if they come to a PTA, whatever it is, and they hear that the son is learning good, how much nachas a parent has. So he says, in Cain, nidmilatzmeinu is riksha bari oilam b'masenu. Interesting point that Rabbi Shmuel Birnbaum wants to bring out here. To bring nachas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says. He says, when a person, I'm just going to read you what he writes here. When a person pushes himself to learn another word of Torah or another sentence of Gemara, or he says, he tries to learn another Tosfos. It says, as Goydel Hanachas Ruach, I guess he felt this from Shmuel Birnbaum. He says, you can't imagine the amount of Nachas Ruach that a Kodesh Baruch Hu has, who's standing by him to teach him. So he says, that the best thing we can do on behalf of the Eibishter, he says, Hashem sees that we're trying to learn. We're trying to learn another word, another sentence, he says. And that's what he says. This is the Indian, he says that that a person that we have to understand. We have to try to get Midam from Mesikas HaTorah. That can come to us. The sweetness of the Torah can come to us by applying ourselves to the Torah, putting our koiches into learning as much as we can. That'll give us the sweetness of the Torah. But at the same time, even without that, realizing how much Hashem loves us and how much nachas we bring to Kadosh Baruch Hu through our learning, that also can give us certain mesikas of the Torah. This one more thing I want to bring out in the beginning, again, ties in with what we said a little earlier. Rashi says, V'yishma Yisrael, Rashi says, Mashmu Shamabah, Kriyas Yamsuf, U'Mulchemes Amalek. So what is shot that what he was thinking about was this. These two things maybe go together. We said it was Kriyas Yamsuf. And as mentioned, the whole world heard it, Shamam Yugozim. But afterwards there was Mulchemes Amalek. That Amalek came to fight with Klal Yisrael. So this alone bothered Yisrael. This Vayishma Yisrael, he didn't hear two separate things here. He heard one thing happened was one nest was Kriyas Yamsuf. Another nest happened. They fought Amalek and they won against Amalek. No, it couldn't mean. Rashi brings the two things together. He heard this tremendous thing that happened, Kriyas Yamsuf, and then he heard there was a whole nation that heard also Kriyas Yamsuf. They also trembled. The whole world trembled, and they came and fought against Klal Yisrael. So he's as Yisra, as a thinking person, it bothered him. How in the world did he get the, I don't know what to call it even, chutzpah, or you got to be crazy. Kodesh Baruch does such a nest for a nation, the whole world trembled. You split the Yamsuf for these people, and then you want to come and fight with them? None of us, he said. That alone he saw that you can go in one ear and go out the other ear. You could. Mamish made no roshim on Amalek. Absolutely no roshim, as if nothing happened. They came and they fought as if they weren't goyers the whole Indian. So that moved Yisrael. That's what moved Yisrael. He says, look at what could be. If you don't take it to heart, if you don't do something, you could ignore the biggest thing in the world. It can happen, and not make a roshim on you. So he said that's what we see. That let's say we look around in the world, people are walking around the street. They're not thinking that this, nothing, don't care what, they're living a life. No, the Welt geht weiter. But a person should think about things. A person, what are all these people doing? What do they think it is? Are they crazy? Do you think they're in this world just forever? There's no cheshbon, there's no bar olam, there's no cheshbon, there's no, you do what you want. It's a hefke Welt. That's right for the world is like that. Right? But it should hit home that that's how it could be. We got to do something. We can't let this. We can't let ourselves drown with everybody else. That alone should move us in a sense. Yishma Yisrei, that's Indian of Shmiya, that a person should think and see things that's a pella. It's a pella how the world lives. If you think about it, Abisha created Bechira. It's also one of the creations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he and the world is called Olam. It's Helam. Hashem is hidden. Hashem made the world in a way that you don't even know he's there. He made everything, and all the chachma and the bria and everything. There's so much around to see in our bodies, the chachma and the world, the trees and the birds and everything that goes on. A world it's so obvious, and at the same time it's so hidden. So we have to not let that happen to us. We have to think what make a cheshbon nefesh. We have to figure out what we want to do with our lives, what's important, where we should put our effort, where we should be, where we should put our koiches in, what's really going to count down the line. All these things that not to be taken by all these like Brown said in the beginning, that the whole world heard about it and they went right to the Taivas to let them change their mahalach. But that's the avodah was supposed to. Yeshua is the example here that this week's parasha of Yeshua, he heard and he did something. He did something about it, and that's what mechayev us to be thinking people and to do something, to change, to be better, to try always and to bring we should talk to be zeicha to bring a nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Sure. The only thing about in that Gemara, it says